We are continuing with 4-year-old training, and we are going through the daily lessons, and we got through with the general knowledge, and we talked about rote counting on our previous one, and now we're ready to get into touching and counting. In addition to rote counting, it's very important that we help the children not just learn the sequence of the sounds, but that they understand the idea of a one-to-one correspondence, meaning that if you ask them to count out objects, that they can literally tell you how many there are. Because when you first start this, if you've ever done this with a child who has no idea of one-to-one correspondence, let's say you've got a child who you've taught to count to 10 and in circle, and then you ask them how many bears there are here. Well, they're going to look at these bears and then they're going to count. But they don't have anything to do with each other. There's no correlation between the two. So they just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 bears. And they have no idea the idea of quantity, that sequence of sounds, that sequence of counting is supposed to correlate to actually figuring out a number, a quantity of how many are here. And so teaching them that skill is a huge step forward in mathematical concepts. And so with that, one of the key ways that we do that is touching and counting. And touching and counting involves setting out objects or even finding objects. And it doesn't matter if they're the same thing or if they're different things. And then literally touching them and saying one number as you touch one object. And when you're doing this, at least to begin with, you want to be very exaggerated so that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you'll notice that here, when I'm doing this at the beginning, I have lots of space between them, and I have fairly big objects. I mean, they're an inch at least a piece. It increases the difficulty of this immensely by moving things closer together or by making them smaller. So the bigger that we are, the further apart we are, the easier it is for a child to see and to follow what you're doing. Now, touching and counting is only one type of activity for this idea of one-to-one correspondence that we're going to practice. We're going to practice touching and counting, and we're going to practice moving and counting. And then in addition to that, we're going to practice that counting and stopping on a given number. And when we put all of those skills together, they're going to lead up to this idea of one-to-one correspondence, which is, again, a necessary step to be ready for the first lesson in true arithmetic, which is going to be subtraction in our school. And we'll get to that down the road, but we're going to talk about each of these. So this is touching and counting, where I put my finger, or the child puts their finger on each object and moves from object to object. That is different than moving and counting. And moving and counting involves oftentimes either moving an object into or out of a container, or sometimes we just call it like sheep over a fence, where you're going to move an object from one side to another. And so for this one, we would, and this is very important because this is an area where they mix up, we're going to teach them that as they set the object down, they're going to say the number. Otherwise, what they're going to say is, and this is a mistake they make, so put your eyes on me so you can see it, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do you see how they want, every time they put their hand down, they want to say a number? And that, of course, leads to the wrong number. And if you can't accurately count objects out, then there's no way that we can use counters and start with subtraction. So it's very important that we get this idea of one-to-one correspondence so that we can do that. All right. So when we do this, we're going to teach them that when they touch the ground, when they hear that sound, that's when we make our number. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's very important as we're doing this that the children learn when to say it exactly, and they associate it with that setting it down or letting it go, the end of the movement. Another reason for that is that sometimes when they have something in their hand, like they get distracted, like, halfway through, and they don't know if they've said the number, they don't know if they're putting it up, they don't know what they're doing. And so getting the children back and focused on what they're doing, again, if you're doing it when you release it, then you always know if it's in your hand, you haven't released it yet. So it's very easy for them to determine that they haven't said that number yet. Now, of course, they will also have lost count of what they were saying at the same time that they got distracted with this in their hand. So they may have to touch and count to see how many are here to know what this one in their hand is. That's not a skill they're going to have magically on their own. You're going to have to help them with that. But it is something that we want to work on because, well, distractions happen to all of us, whether we are 4 or 45. And learning how to find ourselves back and to refocus is a skill that we have to teach them. It's not something that we come by naturally, for the most part. Every now and then you get a child who has amazing focus and can do that on their own. Yes, ma'am.
I just think it's funny that you say to make sure they hear the noise, because I was counting puzzle pieces for Miss Falconer, and I was getting so lost that I could only count the puzzle piece once it hit the board, and I heard it, and I'd be like, 1, 2, and that was the only way I could keep count, because it's like 100-piece puzzles.
Right. Absolutely. And one of the things I do like to teach kids when I'm doing an activity like that in front of them is that I like to teach them, like, for example, to make piles of 5. Now, of course, I know my 5 multiplication table, so I know if I'm looking for 100-piece puzzles, then what I need is 20 piles of 5. But it's really helpful to teach them to count out, and they can count out 5 puzzle pieces again and again and again and again. And it really does make a difference to them that they're practicing that skill over and over again. But, for example, I was babysitting Miss Ford's kids the other night. That was me. I had the wrong sandwich.
Okay. You do it.
Sorry, I got them mixed up.
As long as it was.
Yeah, it wasn't the drive-through people. Yeah. Sorry. I love that we're going to preserve that for eternity. By the way, that's perfect.
Her face was the best.
Well, yeah, unwrapping what looks like a brand new sandwich and there's a bite out of it. I can see where that would throw you. Okay. Anyway, sorry. We were playing Risk the other night when I was babysitting, and really and truly, Lane and I were playing Risk because he's 9 and he's old enough to actually play that game. But Cody wanted to play also. So when you play Risk with just 2 people, then you have a pretend third person. It's called the neutral party that you set up on the board. And so Cody played the part of the neutral third party. And so you're supposed to start off by counting out 40 of the little men to place on the board. Well, there's no way Cody could count out 40 of those little men. That's not a skill that he can do. But what he could do is count out 5 and then count out 8 piles of 5. And so we would count out a pile of 5, and then we would count out another pile of 5, and then we would count out, and I told him we need 8 of those piles. So then he could count piles too, and by breaking it down like that, then he could count out his 40 men basically on his own and experience success with that. And he was so proud of himself that he could do that, because telling him to count out 40 of those little men was impossible. But he was really impressed that he could do that. Now, I will tell you that having played that with him, I definitely think that he needs to have some practice with counting die, because we would roll the die for the game, and he would, like, the attacker rolls 3 and the defender rolls 2 or whatever. So Lane would roll his and he would be like 6, 5, and a 2. And then Cody would roll his, and it didn't matter what they said. He would say 6 and a 6, I win. They would be 2 1s and he would be like 6 and 6, I win. We would all be like, no, that's not how that works. He had no clue. So we definitely need to practice learning to read the dots on the dice. But, it was a lot of fun and entertainment. And it was gratifying to see that he definitely had the beginnings of the idea of how to touch and count. And you could tell that had been practiced. And, of course, he was also doing the moving and counting, because As he counted the 5 out, he was moving and counting. As he counted the piles, then he was touching and counting. And he was putting those two skills together, and he accurately got to 40, which is pretty impressive. Of course, he couldn't do the multiplication part of it. He could just, but still, it was awesome. Okay, so when we start teaching this, actually, Miss Falconer, before I go too much further, would you run to Jade's room, and she has the base 10 like wooden blocks. I want one of the hundreds.
Okay.
And you probably should go ahead and get me the like ones and a couple of 10s and 1,000 twos, just so we have them. Thank you. All right, so as we are going to teach this, we're going to start off and we're going to teach them by having them, like I said, very far apart, and we're going to overly exaggerate our saying it. So I'm going to say it, and then you're going to say it after me as I touch the bear. Now, are you going to say it before I touch the bear? No. You're going to wait until I touch the bear. Are you ready? 1. Now you say it, okay? I'll point to myself when it's my turn. I'll point to you when it's your turn, all right? 1. 2. 3. Very good.
I have a whole set that's unopened. If you would rather have that, would that be more helpful, or do you want my set that's already open?
Just your set that's open is fine. Thanks.
Sorry.
All right, so one of the things that we did there is that I was giving you the visual cue back and forth with pointing. When you do DISTAR training, you will be exposed to the idea of pointing to yourself and pointing to the audience so that they have that visual cue. But it's not a bad thing to introduce in things other than DISTAR because it really does help with it. Now, if I want to do it with us together and I want to do it, then I will point at you and point to this at the same time. Are you ready? Well, let's count together. Are you ready? We're going to count together. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so they've got 2 visual cues that they're trying to pay attention to there. Some of them are going to be so busy watching your finger to know when it's their turn to speak that they have no idea what's going on down here. And that's just one of those aspects of learning that we have to compensate for as we teach. And of course, the way that we do that is the 3-period lesson. And I'm going to give a lesson on that in just a minute. But right now, we're just going to suffice it to say that this is a skill you're going to have to teach again and again and again. They're not going to get it the first time. They're not going to get it the first, for some kids, they're not going to get it the first 100 times. They're going to need it taught over and over and over again because they have no clue what on earth you're talking about. And that's okay. This is something that builds very gradually. At the most, at the very most, the absolute highest that we would expect a child to be able to count out, to pull out and to count out is 19. Even at the end of kindergarten, we only expect them to be able to touch and count up to 40. After that, there's just no need for it. I mean, very few of us need that skill. All right, so these are base 10 blocks, and sometimes they're wood and sometimes they're plastic, but they have they have the units that have been put together, and you can see here that this is the 100, and it is as if 100 of the little single units had been glued together, and it's 10 by 10, and so of course we can use it to teach many different skills. We introduced these in kindergarten, and we are still using them sometimes all the way up through like junior high when they're talking about moving decimals in mathematics. These can be a really important visual cue. And so they have a lot of different uses. At this age, we use them sometimes to touch and count. And you can use the individual ones like this for moving and counting. You can also use them for touching and counting. When we get a little more sophisticated and we can reliably touch and count to 10, then it can be very helpful to start teaching them to do it on the rod, where the rod is all put together. And when we do this, we teach them to squeeze it as they touch it. The squeeze is what gives them the number. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see how much more difficult that is than here, where you're getting that big movement between the touching and counting. In kindergarten, at the end of the year, when we're asking them to touch and count, we are still going to be using this block. We'll use the 100 block, and we will ask them to put their finger on each square and to count it. And you will see the limit of what a child can do at that point, because they will touch and count so far. They'll start off with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they'll get to their limit, whatever it is, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and their finger just starts sliding down the row. When that finger starts sliding down the row, they have no idea. They're not doing that one-to-one correspondence anymore. They're just simply saying the rhythm and trying to move through it. And that is a signal that you've reached the limit of what it is that they can do. Now, whether that is a limit because they don't understand it after that point, they haven't had sufficient practice, they are, sometimes they've lost focus, they're distracted, they're bored, they're ready to go outside and play, or they're young. There are 4,000 factors that can play into it. And honestly, as far as the remedy for it, the reason that they can't do it doesn't particularly matter. We don't address an inability to count, an inability to understand one-to-one correspondence higher than, let's say, 12 differently for the fact that they don't get the correspondence at that point versus they're bored or they're young and they want to play. The answer is more practice and more time. We have to build up their endurance. We have to give them more practice and help that solidify within their brain. And learning for kids is about like learning for us as adults. Whether it's something that comes easily to us or something that's, and yet we don't like, or it's something that is hard for us, and yet we're very interested in learning it. Either way, repetition is key. We have to do it over and over and over again.
What I find, Ms. Green, is that touching and counting, they get it, right? Once they get it, they get it. But something about the moving and counting, I see it staggers a little.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's a struggle more for them to kind of grab it and hold on to it with that moving and dropping it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And touching and counting is almost always easier for children, but you will have a group of kids. Usually if you have 18 kids, you'll have 2, maybe 3, who moving and counting, they get that.
Yeah.
But they don't get touching and counting at all. They can't count those stationary objects and just move their finger. They need to physically move it. And you'll see them. Sometimes they'll turn touching and counting. I've seen this with adults too. They'll turn touching and counting into moving and counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. They count like that. They have to physically do the movement in order to get it. And again, it's going to be just a toss-up, what works for the children, for that particular child, and what doesn't. And the reason that we practice both skills is that we need to have that, we need to have that roundness, that robustness for all of the children. In fact, oftentimes we need to practice the skills that are harder for them much more rigorously than we need to practice the skills that are easy for them. They like to practice the things that they're good at. They feel successful with that. But of course, what we need more practice on are the things that we're not good at. Nobody likes that. That's universal. Adults, it doesn't matter. None of us want to do the thing that we're bad at. We all want to practice the things that we're good at. And that's why we choose the professions we do. Nobody picks a profession because they think, I would be really terrible at that job, but it would be very good for me to have that job. I think that I should definitely go into that field because while I have no natural proclivities for it and would not be successful at all, probably couldn't even get paid to do it, it would certainly be the one that would cause me the most personal growth. So I think I will venture into that field and starve. It's not how it goes. And it's the same thing for the kids. They don't look at the shelves and think, that particular activity is a challenge. And I can't do it. And I feel like it's too hard and it's going to make me frustrated and feel like I am worthless and stupid. So I think I'll pick that one. That's not what they do. And it's why when we get to kindergarten that we assign work to the children at that point and stop letting them pick. In preschool, that's okay. Preschool is more about developing a love for learning and for getting to feel that kind of success. And so if they want to pick the same math work every day, we can encourage them to pick something else that's a little more challenging for them during their individual work time, but we're not going to require that. And, you know, that's just, it's a part of that age and that maturity. You know, preschoolers do need more of that sense of play. And in kindergarten, we're really working on starting to develop that idea of working through something even though it's hard. Yes, ma'am.
How young do you notice when a child gravitates more towards a certain subject? I mean, is like 2-year-olds are getting progress reports and you see how they're doing in math and their reading skills. If they're struggling in their math skills, is that something you notice they continue to struggle with all through school and that's just how their brain works? They gravitate towards more of the language and reading? Or do you notice that changing as they get older?
It depends. And there is very little about human development that is truly predictable. Just like there's very little about it that cannot be changed somewhere along the way. But oftentimes, if we have a 2-year-old who has a strong liking for math or for numbers, they will keep that liking for it, and they'll practice the work that has to do with that, and so then they end up being a little more precocious than their classmates as they get into like kindergarten. Now, whether that translates into an actual mathematical ability is a different thing, because in kinder, in first, in second, maybe even some in 3rd grade, a large part of their ability within the classroom is determined by the individual development. So you can see that the fact that some children in the classroom are almost a full year older than others makes a huge difference in how successful they are within the classroom. Now, by the time that we're getting into like the tweens, 9, 10, 11, and certainly into the teenage years, that advantage to the older child is diminishing. But certainly in those early years, it makes a huge difference. And so a child, for example, that has trouble with number recognition as a 2-year-old won't practice that work as easily or as readily because that's hard for them as a preschooler. And so when they get to kindergarten, they haven't had as much practice. They're not as familiar with it. And so it's a lot more of a struggle for them. Now, at kindergarten, if they're in our program, then we will start requiring them to do some of the individual work with that skill on a regular basis so that they're getting what they need and not just what they want to pick, the easy thing. Right. And that should help to normalize it some, but nothing is as good as familiarity. So if you had a child, for example, that like your own child, that in their 2-year-old year was behind, so to speak, or struggling with math and counting, then the best thing you can do is make sure that you emphasize and practice that with them extra and try to make it fun. If you can entice them into thinking it's fun to do those activities, then you can really help them to develop in that area and bring up some of that. Because at 2, we're not looking so much at differences in intelligence. That's not usually what we're seeing. What we're actually seeing is differences in development. Yeah. And the children who are overly developed, they come across as smart. Mm-hmm. And the children who have any kind of developmental delay come across as slow or like they're going to struggle. But in actuality, when you take those same children and you're looking at them when they are 10, 11, 12, and you're looking at IQ tests, oftentimes the children who seemed behind, who seemed delayed, actually have the higher IQ because there was more thinking going on in their brain and they were processing those higher concepts, but they couldn't necessarily get it out. So the early verbal ability and early progress report, it has more to do with helping us to direct that growth than it does with predetermining
What subject they'll succeed in.
right, or a final success level, quotient, you know? Now, I mean, there are definitely children who are linguistically delayed. You know, they're not talking, and that delay stays with them, and they verbal continues to be a struggle their whole life. You know, I mean, they're limited by it, but that's not always true. Sometimes you've got the kids who just aren't talking, but they're thinking, and there's a lot going on in their brain, and when they finally get around to putting it out, there's a whole lot of brain in there, and so, you know, it's hard to look at that. And I will tell you right now, as an educator, that preschool, even 4-year-old year, too early to determine whether or not a child is smart. What you're really looking at is developmental differences. Yeah. And some children seem smart, and when their peers catch up to them developmentally, turns out they're not so smart. And some children seem like they're really struggling. My little slow Joe in my classic example, Super Sally is probably developmentally advanced. She would test above her age and her skill level, my classic Super Sally. But slow Joe may actually have the higher IQ, but he hadn't got it all together and be focusing and working on it. And we see this time and time again, especially as we're getting into kinder, first grade, second grade, where we're starting to be able to separate the two, the actual achievement versus their abilities. And we're looking at those as separate skills. We see kids whose IQ is high, but their actual output is, I mean, usually it's middle of the road. Sometimes it's the bottom half of the class. But their actual IQ is you know, top quarter. But they're not yet able to get it together to put that into function. And this is kind of off topic, but I'm here, so I might as well finish my thought. The difficulty in those situations is that there's no predicting the future. You know, we have to take the information that we have at this moment and then decide what's best for that child. And that can be very difficult, you know, because sometimes we look at a child who tests as very intelligent and who seems really, you know, like they're going to be smart. But all the way through kindergarten, they just haven't excelled. I mean, they've kept their head above water, but they just haven't excelled. And you get to the end of the year, and they've played because they were young. And they could go to first, and they can keep it. And for some kids, that's going to be the best choice for them, because repeating kinder is going to be devastating to them. And that's just not the right, it's not the right choice for that child when you look at them as a whole. And you have to look at them as a whole. And then there are some children who their natural confidence or their joie de vivre, their love of life, is such that it's not going to hurt them to repeat kinder, but that advantage that they're going to have at being older and at having done it twice and having that really firm foundation is going to make all the difference in how they succeed long term. And if you'll pardon me for calling out specific names and specific children, your brother Jackson is the one I was thinking of in all of this. And your mother, you know, I mean, we got to the end of his kindergarten year and met with her and talked to her. And I mean, he just barely had his head above water at the end of that kindergarten year. I would have taken him into first grade, and we could have seen how he did. But your mother, because she was an older parent who had raised children previously and had seen the long-term effects of that, she was she was willing to, willing to listen and to accept that he needed to be allowed to be a child, a baby, for a little bit longer.
Right.
That he wasn't ready to go to first grade with all of the work that it entailed all day. And that he needed to play a little bit more and to develop a little bit more. And so he had that second year of kindergarten, and then he tutored with Mrs. Hammond the summer after that second year of kindergarten. I think he tutored between the 2 summers too. But when he walked into first grade, that child was cocky, he was confident, he was the top of the class. And in spite of the fact that he has some organic struggles with reading, he still, and every child in the class still believes that he's the smartest child in that room or right up there. And that's a huge gift to him, because one of the things I learned in college, absolutely, was that oftentimes I got the grade for what I acted like I expected. I can tell you that there are classes that I should have gotten. I should not have passed that class, or I should have gotten a D in it, but I walked in the front door every day acting like I was an all-A student. And like, you wouldn't dare give me something other than an A, and if it was, it must be a mistake, and I should be allowed to fix it, right? And there are definitely classes where I got an A in that college class, and I did not deserve it. And I know I got it because the teacher gave me the benefit of the doubt, so to speak. And that self-image, it's priceless. And Jackson is going to benefit all the way through from feeling like he's a top student. And he's going to develop a work ethic to keep that alive and to make that true. Some of the kids that we have that are the most successful coming from Step by Step are actually the ones that struggled the most, but they learned the value of hard work. And developing a work ethic is by far and large the most important ingredient in success. More than anything else, more than natural ability, more than what they did as preschoolers, more than when they came to Step by Step, when they transferred. If we can teach the children to work, we can teach them to succeed. And that's crucial. And so a lot of times, you know, when we talk about like making circle go a little bit longer or stretching the children and expanding it, what we're trying to do is to develop that idea of a work ethic. Now, some kids, they develop the work ethic because they like the feeling of success. And I think that's Jackson. He's going to work really hard because he wants to succeed. He wants to check those boxes off, you know. Some kids develop a work ethic because they can't stand to fail. Miss Ford.
I don't like to lose.
Yeah, she doesn't like to lose. And so it shows up in everything she does, because heaven forbid she lose. She may not necessarily give her best all the time, but if she's thinking she's going to lose, then all bets are off and she's going to have to win.
That's Janae too.
Some children develop a work ethic just because it's part of who they are. They cannot give less than their best at everything all the time. This is Mrs. Collins. This is Aunt Nancy. It doesn't matter. You can't, this reminds me of you. The Miss Falconer I just called out there. You can't tell them, don't worry about that, let it go, it doesn't matter, it's fine, that's good enough.
It's gonna get done. Doesn't matter.
It's got to be, you're
I
all,
will price the times during schedules, it will get done.
and it's going to be to the very best of your ability, and yeah. And this is why sometimes that you drive yourself to tears over looking at schedules when somebody else would have walked away a long time ago. And that's why you need friends who come in and say, no, that looks good. That's exactly what it's supposed to look like.
That was exactly what I needed.
Yeah, is that's right. Even though you feel insecure about it, that's right, and we can go on. And so that was a long thing off of touching and counting. But it was important because...
I want to say it was necessary.
It is, and part of what I'm hoping to record here is not just how we do things, but why we do them the way that we do.
Yeah.
And so when we address questions like that, we're getting into the philosophy that goes behind everything that we do as a school. And so they're crucial. So please keep the questions coming. They are something I definitely want to document and to preserve and to make sure that we have for posterity. All right, so are we good? Do you need to restart it? Okay.
No,
Okay.
we have a few more minutes.
Okay. All right. So we talked about touching and counting. And again, further apart, larger objects are easier. Closer together, smaller objects make it more difficult. In a row is easier. Not in a row is much more difficult. So, for example, even if we're only ready to touch and count to 4, if I am putting out 4 and I'm putting them out in an array like this, rather than in a row, I've made it much more difficult that we have to go and wrap. And even this is is easier than the random like drop, and then we have to count, and that is the most difficult, especially where some are together or some are apart. And so these are all different ways to practice touching and counting, and to do it. Now, there's a game I like to play with the kids because, of course, in preschool, they still like to help you. You don't ask them to do you a favor and they all groan and put their heads down and try to pretend like they're invisible at their desk like they do in junior high. Unless they're in the middle of something they don't want to do even more than help you, in which case they're all like, oh, me. But with the preschoolers, sometimes the way that I like to do touching and counting with them is to play the uh-oh game. Is I pick up the whatever it is and I drop them and I say, uh-oh, can you come count these and pick them up and give them to me and tell me how many I dropped? And have the children come up and do that. Okay. They can do that all day. They will love to do that, and then they give them to me and there were 5 and I say, oh, okay, well this time I'm going to try it again. Let's see how many I got this time. Uh-oh. All right, can you come up and count these and tell me how many I got? 1, 2. Now look how good we're doing as we're doing this. I am not only practicing touching and counting and moving and counting. Look at my tripod grasp as I pick up that bear and move it into my palm. We're talking fine motor skills there too. So we've got multiple activities going on there, right? And then of course when they get them all and they hand them to you, then that's again an excellent activity for them. There are lots of different games that you can come up with to play this way. Sometimes we have these bears or frogs or whatever on the shelves, and we'll have the little colored cups that go with them. And most of the time with that, then we'll have, let's say, 4 bears and a little red cup. And they're supposed to color sort the red bears into the red cup and the blue bears into the blue cup and the yellow bears into the yellow cup. And that's another work that you can pull off the shelf and repurpose for your circle. Go ahead. All right. And when you pull that color sorting work off of the shelf and you're putting it into your circle, then you can use it for touching and counting, and it can be a lot of fun because you can pass out the red bears, for example, and have everybody who has a red bear come up. And they can put all the red bears into the red cup and they can practice counting one after another. So this child comes up and they put their bear in and they say 1, and then that child comes up and puts their bear in and they say 2. And then the next child comes up and they put their bear in and they say 3. See how they're having to build off of each other? There's a lot of thinking that goes into that, right? And you tell them that we have to get to whatever number it is, 5, 6, 4, 12, it doesn't matter. We have to get to this number, and when we get to this number, then everybody is there for the birthday party, and we're going to get to sing happy birthday. There is nothing kids like more than to sing happy birthday. And so having the Red Bear birthday party and everybody singing happy birthday to the Red Bears when all the Red Bears get there to the Red Bear birthday party is a huge, successful, fun thing. And they will enjoy that to no end. And you will hear them as they're sitting at their table with those very same Red Bears, putting them into there, counting them out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're all at the birthday party and we're ready. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to the Red Bears. Happy birthday to you. Okay, they'll do that themselves, practicing that same game over and over again at their table because they enjoy that idea of the birthday cake and the birthday party and that experience. It's an important one for the children. Now, when I teach that in circle, I'll start off by saying that, whatever it is, Timmy Red Bear invited 7 of his friends to his birthday party. And so there are going to be 8 kids at the birthday party because we've got Timmy and his 7 friends. So we need to count, we're 8 bears total. And I'll tell them, I'll go through. We've got Timmy and friend 1, friend 2, friend 3, friend 4, friend 5, friend 6, friend 7. How many fingers am I holding up? Am I holding up 7 fingers? No, I'm holding up 8 fingers because we have 7 friends and Timmy. So talk to them about that. Walk them through that math mentally. That's a story problem for them. And they can get there that you have 7 friends and the birthday boy. 7 and 1 is going to be 1 more than 7. That's 8. And then go into, so we're going to count and see if all the Red Bears can come to the birthday party. When we get everybody there, then we get to sing happy birthday. And that whole thing, they will love it, all of it. They'll be so excited. That will be a super fun game. And it took very little preparation other than telling the story and setting up the scenario. And of course, it is so much more fun than just simply counting out 8 red bears or 8 bears in front of you. When you bring the fun, when you involve their sense of imagination and their sense of play, they're going to learn. And that's the most important aspect of that. All right, and then we talked about moving and counting. Then the last one is to count and stop on a number. Now, we talked about the sum when we talked about counting on the number line. And using the number line, like start on 3 and count to 6. Let's count that together. 3, 4, 5, 6. We talked about it some there. But learning to count out from a bowl or a supply and to stop at a certain number, to give me a certain number, is the most advanced skill that these kids need to go to. Is that they have a whole supply of bears or counters or whatever, and to be able to look at a plentiful supply and not count every one that's in there, but instead count out 7 and then stop, or count out 5 and then stop. That is the most difficult aspect of all of this. And that is the ultimate goal, because we have to be able to do that in order to be able to teach subtraction. We have to be able to have a whole bucket full of our counters and count out only 7 of them, because we're going to practice 7, take away 2. And so if we cannot do that reliably, we can't even introduce the idea of subtraction. And so that is definitely something that you want to be practicing with it as well, is count out 4 of those for me, count out 2, but where they have a plentiful supply. Now, what happens with this is that when you go to test this, like let's say that I start off and I ask them to count out 4, and they give me, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they can give me 4, and they can stop there, and I say, oh, that's great, let's do it again. This time I would like 6, and they'll count it out and they'll give you 6. And you can do that, and you can have them practice touching and counting it, make sure that they really had 6 and checking their answer and all that. You can do all of that, and they can do that. And then you say, okay, this time can I have 7? And then they'll go 1, and they just shove the whole thing at you. That was too hard. It was too many. They could count out 6, but 7 was too many for them. And they'll just give them all to you at that point, because they don't know how to stop at 7. It's beyond their capability. And I have this happen in testing, like for going into kinder. I have it testing sometimes when I test kids going into first. They still don't know how to do this. Now in my office, because it's an office, and when I'm testing a child for placement, I'm usually testing them in the office, and there's a limit to what I have. So I hand them a box of paper clips and have them, give me paper clips. And there is definitely a point where they just shove the entire box of paper clips at me, and they're like, "Fine, have them, whatever." You want, yeah, you want 18 of those? Yeah, here you go. That's what you need.
So,
And
Jerianne, I have a question. So the count and stop object and give me, is that kind of the same?
they are.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. This count and stop on a number. It is.
The number
It
line.
covers the number line, like
Okay,
counting from 3
okay.
to 6, and we're gonna, even though we can count up to 15, we're gonna stop at 6. It's up there, but it's also give me.
Got it.
It covers, that phrase covers both of them.
Okay.
And you may need to write give me on there somewhere.
Okay, because I mean, it makes sense. But in my mind, I've always thought it was
Two separate things.
two separate things, yeah.
Yeah, and I probably should articulate them separately, but the count and stop on a number, that being able to go to a certain number and stop,
Yeah.
to sever the activity
Yeah.
before you get to the end of the sequence, that's a whole separate skill.
Okay.
And it, it is definitely something that you have to develop within the children, because they don't have it naturally. And like I said, and it's still something we're practicing in first grade. We're gonna count from 250 to 270. 250, 251, 252, 253, 254, 255, blah, 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 269, 270. And then there are kids who are gonna say 271, 200, and you have to, oh no, where were we stopping? You have to hold that number in your head as you're counting. That's a very hard skill, and it's something that they don't have. How many times have you been, like cooking something, for example, and it says that you need, 2 3/4 teaspoons of whatever, right? And you get out your teaspoon and you measure out the first teaspoon of vanilla and the second teaspoon of vanilla, and then you're like, wait a second,
Yeah.
how much was I supposed to put in there? And you have to go back and look at it again, because you couldn't hold that number in your head as you were doing all of that measuring. I mean, we experience it as adults, and of course they experience it as children, because, as I often say, children are no less complex than adults. They are just simply less skilled at articulating it. And so oftentimes those complex feelings manifest themselves in behavior. Sometimes it's good behavior, sometimes it's not. That's a whole different game, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so we're gonna move on. We need to do all 3 of these every week. But you don't have to do them all 3 every day. So you're gonna pick one of them, whether it's the stop on a number, or touching and counting, or moving and counting, and you are gonna do one of those each day, and you need to alternate between them. And you need to alternate which day of the week that you're doing them on. So if you have Tuesday, Thursday students, they're not always there for touching and counting, and they never get moving and counting, and they never get stopping on a given number or give me. They never get those activities. That's not gonna work out for them. So you're gonna have to alternate which days you do what on them. And then, I already have that here. Be sure to vary which day each activity is done on if you have part-time students in your class. And that includes kids who are enrolled full-time but never come on a certain day. You have to count them as part-timers too whenever you're doing your lesson planning. Because if you only do things on Thursday and they're out every Thursday, then they're always gonna miss that. And if that's their parents' day off, and that's the day that they get time with their parents, it is important that they have that time with their parent. And I know that as teachers, it goes against the grain to admit this, but time with a parent can be actually more important than time in a school. I know that, that's really not something that we like to admit. But that bonding time is very important. And so we have to be sure and not guilt trip the parents over that time they spend with the children also. Just a little aside there, because that's not something that comes to us naturally. If we're teaching, we want all of our students there so that they can all learn. And we have to remember that, for example, Danny goes to her grandpa, her mom's dad, one day a week, and that is priceless. and the learning and development that go on there. It's very different than what goes on in the classroom, but it is immensely important, and it cannot be replaced. And Jade only came to preschool 3 mornings a week, her 3-year-old year, and even then she missed, I would say, probably half of the time. But she was at home with my mom, and I wouldn't take a moment of that time away from her. Every second of it was precious. And my mom's been gone 13 years, but the time that Jade had with her will continue to affect who she is for the rest of her life. So, you know, we have to remember to be patient with those things. All right. The next thing that I have down here is number recognition. And I'm going to put that off for just a moment because I'd like to go ahead and talk about patterning. So we will come back to number recognition in just a second. Patterning is one of those activities that we have added to the curriculum over the last, I don't know, couple of decades. 20 years ago, we wouldn't have taught patterning. We didn't teach patterning, in fact. I can tell you that because I was here then, which is really bizarre to think about. That I've been teaching training for 20 years. That just blows my mind. But yes, it wasn't something that we had in our curriculum at that point in time. It wasn't something that we introduced until they got into, I think, kinder maybe, but probably even first. That's one of the things that has definitely, expectations have definitely changed over time. And though when our kids get into kinder, whether it be public school or private school with us, they're expected to be able to recognize a pattern. And so we've, definitely introduced it and gone to it. And again, this is my whole, yes, believe it or not, we actually can, we can change, we can adopt new ways. We do on occasion actually do that. Look at that, we added patterning, that was a new thing. And in fact, I was talking to Ms. Davis about what I was going to be training on, and she was looking over my notes here or whatever, and she said, patterning? When did patterning get on there? We teach patterning? And I said, yes, we do. And so with that, the first pattern that we're going to teach is very simple, and it's the AB pattern, And for these, it is the straight, AB. Red, yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow. And then you're going to talk to them about, what do you think is going to come next? Red, yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow. What's going to come next? And, you're going to have half of them that look at you like you're crazy, and they're going to say, blue. And you're going to look for the child who's saying the right answer, and you're going to emphasize them, call on them, or you're going to intervene. If they start to say, you're going to say red. That's right, red. Good job, red. And we can talk about errorless learning at another point, but the basis of that is the idea that you start to see the child make a mistake, you're going to intervene before the mistake gets cemented in their brain. That you want to speak over them and supply the right answer, give a visual cue, help them to reinforce the right answer and practice the right answer over and over again, not the wrong answer. Because every time the child gives the wrong answer, they've practiced being wrong. And what ends up in your head is the wrong way because you've practiced being wrong a lot more than you've practiced being right. I joke with the kids in first grade that we don't need to practice being messy. We already know how to be messy. We need to practice being neat on their paperwork. And it is and honestly, I say it to the junior high children as well. But it's absolutely true that, those things, we have to practice the right way. We get the wrong way automatically. That's easy. The right way is what's going to need the practice. And so when we're teaching this patterning, they're not necessarily going to get it at first. But we practice patterning. We can practice it with objects. We can practice it with the children. Boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. What do we need next? We need a boy. We have a girl, so we need a boy. We have a girl, so we need a boy. We have a boy now, so what are we gonna need? We're gonna need a girl. Okay, these are excellent things. They really like patterning with like boy and girl. Okay, they really enjoy that. And so if you make that like part of their line going in and out, they're excited about that. This really only works if you have an equal ratio or close to an equal ratio. You may always have to start with a boy, for example, and end with a boy because you have more boys than girls, but you can't do that. Now, sometimes you have twice as many boys as you do girls. And in that case, you're going to end up with a boy, boy, girl, boy, boy, girl, boy, boy, girl. Okay? That rhythm to the patterning, they like that. And that's a good, that's a good way to help them to see it or to understand it. Yes?
I noticed when I did patterning with my kids that some of them were trying to do same. So we had a red apple, yellow apple, red apple, yellow apple. What comes after this yellow apple? And they want to put the other yellow apple because it's the same.
Yes.
So how would I go about fixing that? Just repeat the pattern to them over and over so that they can see that it's red?
You're going to fix it with language.
Okay.
Okay? So you lay it out in a pattern like this, and you're not asking them for anything. Okay? And you're going to show them, you know, I have red and yellow, and I want to put them into a pattern. So I'm going to put a red, and if I have a red, then I need a yellow, because I already have a red out.
Hold on a second, sorry. Red on values, apparently.
Oh,
Fine.
okay. But that one is still going, right?
That one's still going, yes.
Okay, excellent. So can I keep going with that one?
Let me see. Let me
Okay,
make
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, you tell me when I can go again.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
That was bad.
I would cry.
Just diagnosed it as normal. Why am I gonna go through this? Like, I'm sorry.
All right, my ladies, we are
We're back in business.
back in business. And you can, I was gonna say, you can take my food out of that chair, but you found one. Okay. All right. What we talking? Oh, we're talking about introducing patterning. Okay. So, you're gonna teach and use that. If it's not red, it must be yellow. You know, we have a red, so now we need a yellow. We have a yellow, so now we need a red. We don't want any of the reds next to each other. The reds can't touch each other.
Okay.
You know, or we don't want the yellows next to each other. And so, you know, when you say that, we're going to say, oh, you know, do we want red, red? No, we don't want red, red. We want red and yellow. Red, yellow, red, yellow. Now, if we put a yellow here, what happens? Oh, the yellow we're touching. Are the yellow going to touch in this one? No, we're not going to do that. All right, so what are we going to do? We're going to do, is that same? No, it's not the same. It's different. So now we have red, yellow, red, yellow, red. What do we need next?
Yellow.
We're going to put our yellow next because we have a red, so we need a yellow. That's right. We have a red, so we need a yellow. We have a red, so we need a yellow. All right, and you're going to continue with that. And then you're going to say it's a pattern. Let's look at our pattern again. Red, yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow, red. What would come next?
Yellow.
We were going to keep going. It would be yellow. We have a red, so we need a yellow. Now, tomorrow, when I do this, I'm not going to do red and yellow. Because otherwise, they're going to learn that it's just red and yellow. Right, that's the only pattern they're ever going to see. And in fact, tomorrow when I do it, I'm not going to want to do it with the bears at all. I'm going to want to go on and move on and teach patterning with boys and girls or with,
Frogs and lizards.
Right. And you can also teach patterning with the children and with movements, okay? So let's teach stomps and claps, okay? All right. So every time we have a stomp, we're going to have a All right? So we're going to have a stomp, clap, stomp, clap, stomp, clap. All right, now let's see if you can do it. I want you to stomp, and when she stomps, you're going to clap. Are you ready? Oh, good job. Every time we have a, all right, good job. Let's try that again. Excellent. All right, let's try it. Let's see if we can all do it together, all right? Stomp, clap, stomp, clap, stomp, clap. We will rock you. Yeah, you want to, yeah. But you do, you know, and that is an excellent way, again, to practice patterning. And they are going to have a lot of fun with that. Now, of course, you can also do like pat your head, rub your tummies. You can do pat your shoulders. There are all kinds of movements that you can do with that to continue with patterning.
I was thinking with this part, we did the same thing with watching it. It's a really good, you know.
It does. It feeds right into it. Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, you know, I'm going to do it the right way. Can you do it the right way? Is this the right way? Yeah. It all feeds into it, and it does. It all goes together. That's one of the things I love most about our curriculum, the way that Miss Davis created it and put it together, is that in spite of the fact that we use many different sources for the materials and for the sources are widely varied, and some of them are, based on current research and current things, and some of them are very traditional research methods or educational methods that have been around, forever. They come together into a cohesive whole, and they build, one skill after another. Our name Step by Step is not. It was not a mistake. Yeah. It definitely has that. You can see here that the first patterning type that we're going to teach is A, B, A, B, A, B. And then we go to A, B, C, where we're putting 3 in a row and then repeating it. And that does make it harder when there's 3 in a row of the same kind. And then you'll see that next we have the A, A, B, B. Okay? And the reason that we have A, A, B, B before the A, A, B, is usually because it's easier for them to get the idea of a pair of yellow and a pair of red and a pair of yellow and a pair of red than it is for them to get that you're going to have 2 of these and 1 of that. Doesn't always work that way, and honestly, if you introduced AAB first, I wouldn't fuss at you over, you did that out of order, but it should certainly be there. You'll notice that AAB is before ABB because, again, usually it's easier for them to understand that the double comes first than that the double comes last. It's just a usually thing. It's not always there. Now, there are children whose sense of pattern is extraordinarily developed. And they will notice pattern from the beginning. I mean, like by 2, they are ready for patterning. And they can find the pattern, and they want to put things into a pattern whenever they have them. You give them red and yellow cards, and they're going to line them up in a pattern. Lane Allen?
Lane was so, like if we sat down at the dinner table, we would have to change seats so that it would be a pattern. He still loves patterns, and we'll see it in the strangest places, and that is a pattern. Like he's obsessed.
Yes.
And you'd have to move, or you'd have to move something, rearrange your whole life because it was in a pattern, and then this didn't fit that pattern. We weren't going for a pattern, but it mattered.
Yes.
As a cub, he can recognize a pattern. Like perfect. As a cub, he knew a pattern.
Obsessed.
Yes.
Still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't leave them.
No.
Yeah, it appeals to their sense of order.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. These are the kids usually who end up liking things that are like symmetrical. Mm-hmm. And they end up oftentimes being drawn to fields like architecture, or even the sciences where that orderliness, mathematics, it just makes them happy. It just appeals to them. Then you've got the kids who they're just all over the place and they could not care less. And you can teach them to recognize a pattern if you ask them what is the pattern, but they would not notice it if their life depended on it. And, you know, I mean, we've got both ends of the spectrum. So some kids this is going to be an easy thing for them to get, and some of them it's going to be a very difficult topic for them to get. And, you know, you want to be sure that you're giving enough to the child who is skilled at it, but you're still going back and practicing that basic A, B, A, B, A, B for the child who really is struggling with it. And so patterning is one of those where you can't be like, oh, we've all got A-B patterning and we don't need to practice it anymore. You're still going to have to go back and practice that, you know, even as they get more sophisticated. They still need to go back and remember it because they're not necessarily going to keep all of that in their head or be able to see all of that.
Ms. Green, one time I did a pattern on the dry erase board where it was the magnets. And to me, it gave a difference from seeing it here and then flat on there.
Absolutely. And doing patterning, we talked about counting by fives and the patterning with that, the 5 0 5 0. But you can draw circle, square, circle, square,
yes.
circle, square, and recognize a pattern like that. You can do patterning.
On the felt board.
Yes, on the felt board, and you can do it as you're passing things out, even that you know red, yellow. Like if I'm passing out crayons to do an activity or whatever, and I've got my crayons, one of those things that I do in a preschool room that not everybody does. But I like to have, you know, we usually get 2 boxes of crayons per child. I immediately take the first box of crayons and then divide them all out. So I have a class's set of red crayons all together. So I can pass out just a red crayon to everybody and everybody can have the same color. And it's just something I like to have. I know that's not something that we necessarily provide each of you, but I always do it like with my school supplies immediately because that's just how I like things to be done. I like to be able to have an entire class's worth of a brown and a green or what have you. Anyway, so with that, you know, if I was passing out crayons from my box and I was going to give everybody a red crayon and a yellow crayon, I would say the pattern out loud as I did it. Red, yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow, and practice that pattern. What do you know, you've got a red, now what are you going to need? You're going to need a yellow, and let them practice it with it. And again, it's not something that we have to do necessarily in their circle time, but it's a way to incorporate that patterning into their real life and to help them. And you can even do it with like have them stand up and do it, right? The one right now I keep thinking of is shoes, but I don't know if we have enough feet to do it the right way. But we have some sandals and we have some sneakers. So we could have everybody stand up and put 1 foot in, and we could have sneaker, sandal, sneaker, sandal, sneaker, sandal. What we need next, we need a sneaker. Who's got a sneaker that they can come and put their foot up? Okay, they're gonna love that. They will think that's so funny, and be entertained by that.
Or brunette blonde.
Yes, and then you get a redhead in there to throw your pattern off. Yeah, you're the cherry on top, right? Children in general, they like to feel included, and oftentimes when you use them as part of your activities, whatever it may be, when you can use themselves, their actual bodies, in circle or whatever, that makes them feel like they're part of the whole, part of the group. In fact, adults like this too. If you've ever been with me in like Saturday training and you've ever done the group up activity where I say, you know,
who like the pizza with the pineapples.
Yeah. We're gonna group up by where we were born. Yeah. So find your people. Find that everybody was born, you know, at the same place that you were. If you were born in Texas or out of Texas or whatever, find you know, group up by hair color. You know, all the blondes together, all the, you know.
Well, even in 6th grade when I do story problems, if I just change the story problem, whatever the name of it is, to the children in my class, and change whatever they're buying to something that they want to buy in the Ford store, all of a sudden, then the story problem that they couldn't get, I just traded their name with it and changed the item to something that they actually wanted, made it relevant to them, and then they can get it. It becomes
right.
Real.
Right. Absolutely.
Instead of an abstract, it just becomes.
It becomes real. And this is true. I was actually talking to my nephew, David, who is studying for the firefighter engine operator exam. And he was talking about how hard it is, that he sits down and he's got his stuff and he's all ready to study and he's you know, like ready to focus and everything. And instead of studying the engine operator rules, like if he was going to run like a 9/11 scenario, you know, here, and you know, he was left in charge. Instead of doing that, he ends up studying what is the absolute best glove that you can train a catcher on for his son for Little League Baseball. And he's like, I don't get it. You know, I've got all this and I should be ready to focus. And I told him that's because the most important ingredient in adult learning is believing that you're going to need the information that you have to learn. If you don't believe you need the information, then you're not going to learn it. I mean, it's almost impossible to do it. And he was like, of course, would like to point out that he has sat in training with me more than once. And I have said that more than once. But at the time, he didn't believe that he needed the information, so it didn't make an impact on him. But I told him this yesterday in the car when he was complaining about how hard it is to learn, you know, now as an adult. And the light dawned, and he was like, you are so right. Because, you know, like when I was studying the section on, I don't know, whatever it was, blah, 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 blah. That was so easy. Like I could imagine, it was running a Mayday. I could imagine myself, like, lost in the building, and like, how would I get help, and what series of activities would I need to do to get help if I was, you know, trapped by the fire in the building. That was... Like, I got all those steps perfectly, you know, but when it came time to, like, learn about, like, drawing water out of a pool or a pond, that was so hard because we don't have to do that. I don't have to worry about that. I firefight in the city of Houston. There's a fire hydrant on every corner. I don't have to worry about how do you get water out of it. We got water. That's not necessary. And it, you know, to him, it, like, thoroughly just... Yeah. And the same is true for our kids. The more that they feel involved, especially by the time they're getting to junior high, you're starting to get that difference of, if I really believe that I need to know this, then, you know, it's going to make a big difference. And this is why sometimes parents pay for grades, is because that gives the child the feeling that they need to know it, when the idea of learning for learning's sake, or learning for the sake of getting into college, that's too abstract, it's too far away, it's too, it's, you know, too much. Now, some children are motivated by that concept of, I want to grow up, I want to have a good job, Janae. And so therefore I'm going to do excellent at everything because all of these steps are going to accumulate into being the adult that I want to be. But not all children have that kind of a drive, and some of them, they need that sort of intermediate thing, bribery. And, you know, and sometimes we have to trick ourselves when we have to learn and give ourselves that idea that I must learn this. And so we have to motivate ourselves of if I don't do this, then I can't do this. And treat yourself. And whether that be... whatever, learning the new minimum standards for directors. You know, if I have to, I can't, whatever. Here's the one I've done lately. I'm not allowed to make new work for the shelves until I spend at least part of the time working on developing training materials. Because that's work. And the work for the shelves, that's just fun. It is so fun. It's play. And so I'm not allowed to do this that I love if I don't do this that I have to do, that I need to do. And so, you know, again, for kids, that's not the kind of adult logic and reasoning that they can put into place themselves. So it may be something that you have to do for them to help incentivize the working on the thing that's hard. And, you know, at the 4-year-old year, how does that play out? Well, sometimes that plays out of, we're going to do 2 works off the math shelf and 2 works off the language shelf before we can play on the practical life shelf or the science shelf. Okay?
That's what we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
All the
You have to
time.
spend 30 minutes or 15 minutes on language and 15 minutes on math, and then I'll let you have the 15 on science, 15 on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I would have kids only doing practical life the entire time.
Yeah, and they would. And there's part of me that says, what's wrong with that?
Mm-hmm.
And some days I might let them do that, you know, because the fine motor skills, okay, the development of fine motor skills, it shuts off in that kindergarten year. They're done. At that point, what they got is what they got. And so the more practice that they have in preschool,
I didn't know that.
Oh.
That's what I say. That's
yeah,
good.
it's, yeah. And so the more practice they have in preschool with fine motor skills, the better off they're going to be. And that's, you know, that is important. But at the same time, I say that, and I know that pre-reading skills are important, and the math skills are important. And so we do need to have those standards, you know, but we do need every child to get to practical life every day.
Yeah.
You know, and even if they haven't finished their 2 math works or their two reading works, you know, at the last 15 minutes of individual work time, everybody should get to go to practical life. Whether or not they've done any of the others, they need practical life too. It's not just fluff. And it's so much fun that there's part of our brain that tends to think of it as playing. And it is playing. But again, child's work is play, right? They need that play. Anyway, so off of patterning, and next I need to introduce the idea of the 3-period lesson, and that's what's going to be next. And we've got about 20 minutes left. That's probably enough time to do that.
You said you were gonna go back to number recognition though too.
But I got to teach the 3-period lesson. I was going to say you could have them, you know, like cards, like with each of the patterns. So one group starts with starts with science. This group starts with math. This group starts with language, and that group starts with practical life. And they could draw their pattern every day, and you know.
I think going back to what you said, like making it fun, because you know that seemed fun to kind of give them that whole like do this and then next I do this, you know,
Yeah.
and kind of give them something to look forward to going into.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything that you can do that makes it fun and exciting, and 99% of the time, it's your voice
Yes.
that makes it fun or exciting.
That's right.
It's you that makes that fun. And Miss Pierre in the fun bucket is absolute proof of that.
Oh, yes, the whole. I even got the little guppy saying the fun bucket.
Yes, Danny is all over the fun bucket. Yes.
What's the fun bucket?
It's the teacher bucket. I just changed the name.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we had a song that
Okay.
said the fun bucket, fun bucket. So we go to our singing the fun bucket. Yeah, because I was like, okay, we gotta come up with something else for
To make
the
it
because the
exciting.
teacher bucket just felt like work. You know, it just felt like, you know, even though it's work, it just felt like
Right,
work.
but
you know,
the
I wanted
teaching
to make
bucket
it fun.
is the most fun part
It
of
is the
Circle.
most fun part of
It is
Circle.
absolutely.
Oh, yes.
And the people who
Yes.
never open their teaching
Yes.
bucket, I'm like, your Circle must be
Oh my
so
goodness,
boring.
It got to be
Oh my
boring.
gosh.
It got to be boring.
Yeah, it's got to
I
be.
look forward in doing a teaching bucket. That is my favorite thing.
Yeah,
If we
it-
have to do a short circle,
Yes.
I'd rather do teaching bucket.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
if something's
absolutely.
in the way, okay, we're just gonna do teaching bucket today.
Absolutely. Teaching bucket is the most, it is. It brings the fun.
Oh.
And what's nice about it is that it's already pre-parceled and
Pre-parceled, that's right.
ready. I mean, it's all of those skills, so many things that you practice, but it's already pre-done for you. So, all right. So we're going to start with the 3-period lesson. And for those of you who've been in training with me before, you're already going to know this. But I need to get a few random objects here. And let's see. Okay, so I have some things here, and let's go ahead and talk about these things. Okay? All right, so our lesson for today is that this is a flugel. And this is a flugel. But that's not a flugel, and that's not a flugel. But this is a flugel. And this is a flugel, but that's not a flugel, and that's not a flugel, but that's not a flugel either. All right, so are we all good? We got down what flugels are? Do we know what it is? Great. Let's move on. All right, can you tell me, is that a flugel? Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's not a flugel. Is that a flugel? No, that's not a flugel. Weren't you listening? I told you what a flugel was. This is a flugel, and this is a flugel, and this is a flugel. But that's not a flugel, and this is a flugel. Were you listening? Did you get it? Can you tell me what a flugel is? No. Okay. All right, so watch it like this. This is a flugel. Now it's not a flugel. This is a flugel. But now it's not a flugel. It's not a flugel. It is a flugel. It's not a flugel. It's a flugel. It's not a flugel. It's a flugel again. It's not a flugel. What's a flugel? It's whatever is in my hand. If I am holding it, it is a flugel. Okay, this is how kids feel when we introduce topics. They have no idea what on earth you're talking about. You hold up a card, they don't know if you're talking about the paper, they don't know if you're talking about the finish, they don't know if you're talking about the color, they don't know if you're talking about the picture that's on it, they don't even know if you're talking about the thing that's in your hand, because they could be looking at your forehead or your shoes, and you're telling them this is red, and they're like, they don't know how to learn what you're trying to teach, because you are speaking a foreign language to them. And we have to be aware of that difficulty, that disconnect of language. We have to know how to overcome that in order to be successful in teaching anything. And so we have to teach them how to hear our language and how to understand what we're talking about. And in order to do that, we use something called the 3-period lesson. And by that, we mean that there are 3 periods, or 3 lengths of time within the lesson. And the 3 lengths of time that we have, the first one is what we're going to call the introductory. And this is where we are literally introducing the concept. And this is red, this is red, and this is red. We're simply saying what the item is. We are introducing the concept and showing it to them. We're demonstrating it. Okay? The second period is going to be identification. And in this period, we are simply going to ask them to supply like a yes or no, or to find is this red? Yes. Is this red? No. Find the red. Show me the red. Point to the red. Okay? Hold up the red. At that one, they're just identifying it. You are supplying the vocabulary, and they are simply identifying the word or the item. And then the final one, at the third step, then it is the genuine, true mastery of the object. And this is going to be at the point where you can say, what is this? And they can say, red. There's a lot that goes into it before you get to this point, though. And the 3-period lesson is the most important part of that. So when we first start off with a topic, no matter what it is, we're going to start with this is, show me the, find the, this, excuse me. We're going to start off with the this is. This is blue, and this is blue, And this is blue. And even this is blue. It's a little bit of a funny blue, but it's a blue too. All of these are blue. This is blue. This is the color blue. You can see it right here. And you can see how the lid of this is the same color as this. Believe it or not, that's blue too. And that one is blue. And you see all the blue? That's blue. Okay? All of this, I am simply supplying the blue. My next step is going to be the identification. At this point, then it becomes find the, show me the, where is the, hold up the, etc. I'm not asking them to supply the name. I'm asking them simply to identify or to qualify or disqualify the object. So is this blue?
Yes.
Yes. Is this blue?
Yes.
Is this blue?
No.
No. Is this blue? No. Is this blue? Yes. Good job. All right. And you know, you can point, hold up, you can, they really like it when you get silly with things. So like, you can tell them that I'm going to put one thing on my knee and one thing on my head. And you're going to tell me whether it's my knee or my head, all right? I'm looking for the one that's blue. What are you going to pick? Are you going to pick my knee or my head? Which one has the blue?
Your knee.
My knee, that's right. All right, good. Let's see. I'm going to try and see if I can trick you, okay? Are you ready? All right, it's your turn. Is it going to be on my knee or my head?
Your knee.
Oh, that's right. You guys are so smart. I can't trick you at all. All right, now, Miss Little, it's your turn, and I'm going to see if I can trick you this time. Are you ready? Okay, now let's see which one. Was it on my knee or my head?
Your head.
That's right. You guys are so smart.
They love being smarter than you.
Uh-huh.
You try to trick them and they get it.
Uh-huh. They do. They love it. And that's actually very particular chosen language that I'm going to give you one that's tricky, or I'm going to try to trick you. And acknowledging that was tricky or that was hard, that makes them feel a lot better about venturing a guess. And it helps to prevent that fear of trying. And if you have a child who you know has a reluctance to try, that they don't want to be the one that's unsuccessful, you know, they're afraid of being wrong. Telling them, you know, hey, this is really tricky, can you try it for me? That's permission to get it wrong. Mm-hmm. And that is gold for them to learn to venture out and to try. So it's very important that we make that okay for them, that they have that willingness to put themselves out there. Nobody wants to get up in front of a group and make a mistake, especially a group of your peers. I mean, it's one thing for me to make a mistake in front of 5-year-olds. It's a whole different thing for me to make a mistake in front of, 50 parents, right? Yeah. And I mean, that's embarrassing. And, I'm 45 years old and I'm still embarrassed by that. They don't, like I said, they don't have any less complex emotions. They just don't have the means to articulate it. They can't tell you, well, I'm embarrassed. I don't want to do that because I don't feel secure. So the more that we can make it fun, the more that we can give them permission to fail and to keep trying, and make them willing to keep trying, the better off that they are as learners. And of course, if we could give ourselves permission to make a mistake also, we would be better off as well. But anybody who has to do it again and again and again, you get used to it, The first time I taught training, I was incredibly nervous. Now we're, like I said, 20 years into it, and it feels like going home, And I am not a natural extrovert. For the most part, I could live as a hermit on the side of a mountain alone and read books, and be with my cat, and well, I'll probably even leave my cat along, but Abigail would have to come with me, my dog, and be perfectly happy with that. But we do it over and over again. Not only do we develop a comfort with it. It even becomes to the point that it is our comfort. You know what I mean? It's our home. And teaching teachers has become one of my very favorite things in life to do. And I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to get to do it. So, as we were talking about the 3-period lesson, the first one is the introductory. This is. The second one is that identification. And when we move into the second one, find the, show me the, where is the, is this. Okay, we're going to stay on that level of identification for a long time. We hang out there. Is this red? Is this red? And, be silly with it. This is yellow, right? No. Oh, okay. Then this is yellow, right? No. Oh, okay. I got it this time. I know. This is yellow. Okay. By this point, they're going to be no and laughing and so silly. Okay. Well, Miss Green is just having a hard time today. Her brain is just not working so good because she's old. Let me try again. This one is yellow, right? No. All right. Let's see. This one is yellow, right?
Yes.
Yes! Oh, and they're just going to think they're so clever, okay? Look at all of that we practiced. Now, Super Sally has been back there going, no, that's blue. No, that's green. No, that's red. So she's practicing all of those as she's doing it, right? And Slow Joe has heard Super Sally give all those answers. Oh, and he's thinking, she said blue there. Okay. Okay, so have we practiced all of the other colors too? Absolutely. But have I asked them to move into that mastery period? No. And that's good because for Slow Joe, getting into the mastery period where I ask him, tell me what this is, that is terrifying. That's like the deer in the headlights time. Me? You want me to answer that? Maybe somebody else, right? Somebody else can have a turn? They don't, that's hard. And so we have to remember to have sympathy with that because it really does, well, it makes a huge difference in what you're able to do because they do get that sort of stage fright of being called on. And that intimidation from that can be overwhelming. And so when we finally move into the third step, then that'll be the point at which we're holding up cards and saying, all right, let's say what our colors are. Okay, are you ready? Red, green, blue. That really does not look like purple to me, but it is purple. I mean, it says purple. I know it's supposed to be purple, but it just doesn't look very purple to me. Does it look purple to y'all?
It's a light purple.
It's a light purple.
It's really more of like a periwinkle. There's a lot of blue to it. And it actually looks like the color that blue construction paper fades to.
Oil blue.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about when it starts to change color? It to me, it does not look like.
It's
Yeah.
what Falconer gave me.
I'm sure. Okay, yeah, but just because it's what we supplied doesn't mean I'm not going to criticize
I
it.
didn't think it looked purple either.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think that really looks purple. I think we need a better purple. Orange, and then we've got pink, and white, and black, and brown, and gray. Now, all of these have the names on them. You'll see that. All of these colors have the names on them. Are we supposed to keep the names to our side?
Didn't matter.
We can, but there's nothing wrong with showing them the names. Okay? Are they going to be able to read that?
No.
No. But is there anything wrong with showing it to them? No. Not at all. Do I still know what color this is if it doesn't have the name on it?
You better.
I should. Hopefully, right? Unless I'm colorblind, which, is much less likely to affect women than it is men. Yeah, I should know what colors those are, right?
Some of the silvers and golds and stuff only have the color
On one side.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them are one-sided. But if they're not, can I show them backwards? Sure. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with them seeing the print. Is it bad for them to see words? No. In fact, one of the things we're going to talk about is environmental print awareness. That means awareness of print and their environment around them, and how crucial that is for their development. So is there anything wrong with being able to see those colors? No. In fact, there's a lot of good that can come from that. But yeah,
I want to trim those so bad, it's bothering me.
that they're like really all different.
I just
Laminated
never got
size?
around to it, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I can totally understand that. I really want them all to be laminated in the like pocket lamination so that they're all exactly the same size. But you know, I have fallen in love with pocket laminations, and for so many reasons.
Such a good quality lamination. Yeah, you can't beat it.
Well, it's not shiny.
Right. Well, some of them aren't shiny, and some of them are.
I like the matte ones.
Yes, I order the matte ones specifically for things to use in circles so that we have.
No
When you
glares.
talk about the 3-lesson period, I think about how far I got by taking 2 years of Spanish. And I can understand when people say words in Spanish, and I could be like, oh, and I could catch every so often word, but being able to actually supply the word, no, I'm at that identification, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
you're talking about this, and that's where I stopped at.
Mhm.
That's
In Spanish.
that's such a good example.
I
You
can
never
hear
got
it,
to
I just
master
can't say it.
I'm the same way.
So that's very interesting, because I have the opposite problem.
You can
I
say it, you just can't hear it, that's weird.
yes, in like French, I can say many things in French, but I cannot hear what people are saying in it. But my friend Jessica, when I went to Europe with her in college, she was raised in Austria, and because her parents were missionaries, and so she grew up hearing, you know, French and German all the time, and then she moved back to the States when she was like in high school, and so she forgot a lot of the vocabulary. I'm really good with the vocabulary, but I have no accent and I have no ear to hear what they're saying. I can read it, but I cannot speak it, can't hear it at all. And I have a terrible accent. And so when I traveled with her, we were actually an excellent pair because we would have a three-cornered conversation with anybody that we had to talk to. So we would go up like to the French vendor or whatever, and, you know, I would ask a question, you know, if my halting, you know, schoolgirl French, and then they would start to talk to me, and I would be like, And Jessica would be over there listening, and she would be going, He said blah, 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 blah to me. And then I would be like, oh, okay. And then I would respond. And,
Oh my gosh.
and it took the three of us. Now, the very best one that we ever had, though, was that I'm trying to remember what it was. We were on a train, and the conductor only spoke Czech and German in Czechoslovakia, or it was the Czech Republic by that time. I spent 2 semesters in college studying abroad in Prague, which is the capital of the Czech Republic.
Drove through many times.
Love Prague.
Draining all of her endeavors.
It's still my favorite place, you know, my favorite city on earth. Yeah. Julie and I are talking about trying to go back, you know, now that she's able to travel, and before I'm not able to travel anymore.
Yeah.
And of course it's been, goodness, 30 years. I bet a lot's changed. But Europeans and Americans are very different, you know. To an American, 100 years ago was a long time. And to a European, 100 miles away is a really long way. And I am definitely, you know, American. 100 miles, I don't bat an eye at that. Okay, whatever, you know. It's an hour and a half drive. That's not a big deal, you know.
Yeah.
I've driven that to get Mexican food at College Station before.
Exactly. But in Europe, you know, you'd have gone through 3 countries by the time you drove an hour and a half.
Absolutely. I've visited so many different countries in Europe, and everybody here's like, how? And I was like, well, Europe is probably just as big as America itself, and you just, you know, you only have 50 states here, and you're still in the same country.
Right.
But over there, you leave, and you're already past
So you're like,
3 other
I'm in
countries.
Denmark.
I was standing in an airport. I think maybe it was London. And we were getting on the plane like to come home, and the couple behind me, they were British, and they asked me what time it was in America. And I said, where, in America? And they said, Texas. And I said, which part of Texas are you going to? And they said Houston, and then they said, well, first they said Texas, and they said, America's really big. There probably is more than one time zone. And I said, well, yes. And they said they were going to Texas, and I said, okay, which part of Texas? And they said Houston. So I told them the time, and then they said, Texas is really big, right? It's like bigger than England. And I said, Texas is bigger than France. And they looked at me like they, goggled, and I explained that there are 2 time zones in Texas, and that there are, 5 time zones in the continental I said there are 5 time zones in the United States. And they said, oh, well, we forgot about Alaska and Hawaii. And I said, oh, I wasn't even counting those. I was just talking about the continental United States. And they were thoroughly baffled at that. They had no idea what the scale of it was.
Okay, let me tell you what I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
That there was 2 time zones in Texas.
I didn't either.
I knew that just because of where I used to live.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like when you get out to El Paso, like Texas is kind of a.
Oh wow.
How it does kind of the long thing or whatever, and it's got that long part that sticks out.
Mm-hmm.
That over in El Paso, you get into a different time zone before you leave the state.
It's 1 hour early.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like.
Oh.
Okay, back in the day when we had broadcast television, and they would advertise for shows, they would be like, Murder, She Wrote, 8/7 Central, okay? This is how I learned time zones. Like, in my head, I still think of the fact that, it's 8 on the East Coast, 7, Central, and then, I still have to, go through that in my head that it's 8/7 Central, so I know that would count backwards as we go across the United States for time zones. Today with cable, where they don't advertise it like that, I don't know how children are going to learn time zones. They're out of luck, hopeless, never going to understand.
Curriculum, they're not going to learn it.
Actually, it is in the curriculum, but that's not.
They have to stay with us till we get there.
Exactly. They're just. It's not going to be an automatic. I always know what time it is in DC because it's whatever it is here. If it's 3, then it's It's, 4, 3 Central. So we're in Central. That's us. The second one is us. But yeah. Okay, so we got off.
I think we're out of time.
Oh yeah, we are totally out of time. Okay, before we go, though, the most important thing about the 3-lesson period, and the thing that I really do need to cover, is that whenever you teach a new concept, you're going to use these 3 periods, these 3 phases as we're teaching. And we may go through all 3 phases in one day as we introduce something, especially if it's something that we know that they've been taught before, and most of them know. We may very well go through all 3 parts of those in one day. But whenever we get to the 3rd one, what is our final thing that we're going to do at this point? When we finally get to the 3rd and we're saying, what is this? What are we going to do?
Repeat.
Yes. Yes. We get to the end and we're going to go back and we're going to start all over again. And we're going to go through it all over again. Because at this point, by the time that we're going back through it the 2nd time through, okay, Slow Joe may finally have some idea that you are talking about the color of those cards that you're holding. Okay, he's finally gotten through looking at your shoes and up your nose and whether or not the kid next to him brought a baseball to play with at playground time. He's finally ready to hear that you're talking about the color of those cards. So you're going to go through the entire process again. Okay, now, guess what? You're likely going to need to go through the entire process again after that. Learning is not something that is accomplished in a single stroke, period. We have to do it again and again and again. So this 3 periods of this lesson, you're going to repeat them over and over and over again. And if you go too long without reviewing something, then it's like you haven't taught it at all. And you're going to have to start back up there. One of the things that we've done over the years, and I'll talk about this, some when we get to colors, is that we've added some colors to the rainbow, so to speak. We used to teach simply the Crayola marker colors. You know, the top 10, red, yellow, orange, blue, green, purple, gray, brown, black. And now, I mean, we've added lime green and peach and, you know, pink, magenta, okay, and lavender and turquoise and, tan, okay. Okay, why did we add those? Does anybody know?
I know because you told me.
Yes.
So that the teachers never stop teaching it and have the children forget.
Yes. We used to have an epidemic of kids who would get to kindergarten, like half or more that would get to kindergarten and not know their colors because their 4-year-old teachers taught it the first 6 weeks when it was new, and when they finished introducing all the colors, they would set the colors aside and never practice them again because the kids knew their colors. And no matter how many times in training I would say, you have to review your colors, you have to keep reviewing your colors, you need to keep reviewing your colors, guess what? It would stop. It would stop being fun because it wasn't new. And we didn't become teachers because we like to review. We became teachers because we like to teach. Exactly. And reviewing is the boring part. So, in order to keep our interest, in order to keep us going on it, in order to make it exciting for us, our motivation, we added more colors to teach. Not because we necessarily need to teach those. I mean, does it hurt them to know them? No.
No, they get
Are there
so excited.
They do.
That
And
you add a new color on the board.
Uh-huh.
Oh, we got a new color.
Yes. And are their parents super impressed when they say, oh, my favorite colors are magenta and turquoise? Yes, they love that.
I
you know?
loved it when Lane used to correct his dad on, actually, Dad, that's lavender, that's not purple. Dad was like, what? There's no lavender.
Yes, they are. This is great fun. But at the same time, the thing that we need to do is to make sure that we continue to teach, continue to practice, and keep ourselves fresh in it continuously.
I was going to say that in kindergarten, we still go over those same 10 colors. They have to know those 10 colors. And I review them. Once they all know them and they all have it 100%, I still go over it once a week, every week till the end of the school year.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop.
No, it can't.
No.
It can't. And we go over them in first grade. And I can still tell you that we'll get to first grade and we'll have some kids who by that point have to read the side of the crayon. Especially if we get transfer kids. We get kids that transfer, they still don't know brown from black. They have to read the side of their crayon to know whether they're supposed to color that brown or black.
Wow.
Now at that point, at least they can read the crayon, right? So we practice coloring and color words a lot in first grade, and that's why, is that they still need practice. All right, so we will stop there for the day. Thank you, ladies, for your attention and your time. I really appreciate it.
From Tuesday to Wednesday.